Thank you. Mr. David Smith, Deputy High Commissioner Shri Suneet Mehta, Professor Anthony Maher, Emeritus Professor Satendra Nandan, Mrs. Rishi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. With due respect to the elders of the Nandan land, the High Commission of India and the Mahatma Gandhi Society offers you a warm welcome and our appreciation to all of you for your presence. My name is Niranjan Krishan Aggarwal. I happen to be the president of the Mahatma Gandhi Society, where the banner is shown here. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. David Smith, our popular and distinguished member of the Parliament, for arranging this honorable venue for this special occasion. We are celebrating 153rd birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, the great soul. Gandhiji's life was his message. He lived in truth, even in violent times. He experimented with truth daily in the life of millions with great faith in human goodness and decency. He has left us a great legacy for the benefit of the entire universe. His great and noble message is relevant and meaningful for all times and for all humanity, now more than ever. Our world at present is in turmoil, and every time you listen to the news, a dreadful darkness appears to be descending. Gandhiji's light of ahimsa, non-violence, is needed today. All over, in our hearts and minds, and in our words and actions. Now, just a little bit about Mahatma Gandhi Society. This organization is a result of the inspiration from Emeritus Professor Satendra Nandan, who is the author of Gandhianjali, a book which was published a couple of years back. He is currently writing a book on Gandhiji for Australasian readers, especially for those who may not have much familiarity with Gandhiji. Professor Nandan has visited the railway station of Pietermaritzburg in South Africa, where Gandhiji was forced to vacate the first-class compartment only due to racial discrimination, which was the way of life at that time. That incident and the resulting 6 hours thinking in the cold, sitting on the railway station, changed his entire life. For those 6 hours he sat there and made a few decisions as to what is he going to do. And that's how he acted in South Africa and later on in India and got us the independence. Mahatma Gandhi Society has been formed in a strong belief that the problems of political conflicts, natural calamities, religious struggles, to name a few, that the world is facing these days, could be avoided if Gandhi culture and his messages were followed. The society plans to promote discussions of Gandhi culture in the present and future generations, not only in Canberra, but all over Australia. Gandhiji was an expert in giving strong messages in a few words. For example, he said, "You be the change you wish to see." It's a strong message, and that message was of love. He said, love everybody and everything you have contact with courage and persistence. Don't do it one or 2 days. If you don't succeed today, continue the struggle and you will succeed. And this is how, in one short sentence, there are 3 strong messages. Now, I'll just say a few words on Gandhi culture. Our great personalities have left their mark through specific works of inventions, art, philosophies, or battles. As an example, Albert Einstein will be remembered for the development of atom bomb. But Gandhiji has been different. His legacy cannot be defined by a single act or a single idea. When asked Gandhiji, he just said, "My life is my message." Gandhiji's life continues to stir the imagination of people around the world. Importantly, what has distinguished Gandhiji was that he always put his ideas into practice, and then he watched the results of his actions, and if necessary, he reshaped his ideas and thoughts, looking at the results of his actions. So this is what the biggest message, that we need to act and do something, whatever we decide to do. Basically, as we say, Gandhiji was a Karam Yogi, always actions. Truth, the search for truth, underpinned of Gandhiji's actions. He said, within each individual resides an inner voice, which has the voice of God. Truth can only be obtained by listening to that inner voice. This was possible only through focusing on the self and eschewing all corrupt influences. One of Gandhiji's favorite pictures was of three monkeys, where one monkey had his mouth closed, eyes closed, ears closed. And those monkeys conveyed the message of speak no evil, see no evil, and hear no evil. So in simple ways, he conveyed these strong messages. These three ideas are easy to practice and have the power to change the world. We need to convey Gandhiji's such ideas to our future generations. On a personal note, when I was studying in the university for my bachelor's degree, one of my lecturers inspired us to form an association which we named as Gandhi Study Circle. That we met once a fortnight, and each student or the lecturer selected a book on Gandhi or about Gandhi. And then, after reading that book, putting great full thought into it, he presented a seminar. And that seminar was followed by questions, and that is how I had the feeling as if I had read that book, because the sort of imagination and reflective discussion that took place gave me the feeling of the whole basis of what was conveyed, the message that was conveyed in that book. And let me say, at one of my seminars, I concluded the following three morals from my study of Gandhiji's life and his culture. First one was, do not waste time. If you waste time today, tomorrow it will waste you. And the second one is, don't take a no for an answer. Instead, find a way to achieve the desired end, but you might need a lot of courage. When Gandhiji sat on the railway station for 6 hours in the cold, imagine what courage he came up with. With courage he said, I'll do this and I'll do that. So he showed that courage, and that's the courage we need to have, show persistent practice. And the third one is daily prayer is essential for correct logical thinking. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much. I invite Shri Suneet Mehta, Deputy High Commissioner of India. Mr. Mehta belongs to the highly regarded Indian Foreign Service of the Government of India. He has served for nearly 15 years in various Indian embassies, including in Madrid and Washington, D.C., where he was responsible for Indian relations with the US Congress. Shri Suneet. Thank you.
Thank you, Niranjan, for that very kind and generous introduction. Honorable David Smith, MP from ACT, Mr. Niranjan, Aggarwal, President of Mahatma Gandhi Society, Professor Anthony Maher, Executive Director of the Australian Centre of Christianity and Culture from Charles Sturt University, Emeritus Professor Satendra Nandan, former MP and Cabinet Minister from Fiji, eminent members of the Indian diaspora present here, Namaste and welcome to you all. I'm grateful to Mr. Aggarwal, President of the Mahatma Gandhi Society, for organizing the Mahatma Gandhi Symposium today. I'm told this is the first symposium, so special thanks to you for that. Special thanks to also Honorable David Smith for this prestigious venue of Parliament House, where we are all gathered here for this very auspicious event. I deeply value the opportunity to participate at the event today to commemorate the 153rd birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. I can see many friends and esteemed members of the Indian diaspora here who also graced the ceremony of paying tribute to Mahatma Gandhi on 2nd October, which was organized by the High Commission at the Glebe Park. So thanks again to you all for participating at the event today. As already mentioned by Mr. Aggarwal, Mahatma Gandhi's ideology is universal, which is relevant for all times. As he famously said, "My life is my message." This is an apt occasion today for all of us to reflect on the life, the message, and the work of the father of the nation. Gandhiji's ideology is admired throughout the world for its universal and spiritual appeal. Recognizing the multifaceted contributions of Mahatma Ji, United Nations in June of 2007 passed a resolution to observe 2nd October as the International Day of Non-Violence. The resolution reaffirmed the universal relevance of the principle of non-violence to secure peace, tolerance, compassion, and understanding in the world. Gandhiji was a firm believer in the power of peace and non-violence. He said, "The power based on love is 1,000 times more effective and permanent than the one derived from the fear of punishment." He always led by example. Gandhiji taught us to stand strong in the face of fear, to understand the importance of truth, and to fight for justice with all our conviction from the heart, without using violence. Many people say that non-violence is the weapon of the weak, but in reality, non-violence and tolerance require a great degree of courage and patience. Be it the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, the Champaran Satyagraha, non-cooperation movement, civil disobedience movement, these are fine examples of Gandhiji's successfully putting his thoughts into action. Given the fact that many forms of war and conflict are threatening global peace, his idea of non-violence is very relevant and more relevant today. Gandhiji used to respect all religions. The secular ideologies of Gandhiji are not only there in Indian constitution, but in Indian society as the core value system. That is why so many people from diverse religions live and prosper together in India. Gandhiji showed the power of tolerance towards all religions. Tolerance in the society is needed more than ever to address the challenges being faced in the world today. Gandhiji's respect for diversity and human element in all of us led him to work tirelessly for the upliftment of the weak as part of the larger nation-building exercise. His efforts on behalf of the people who were considered untouchables, whom he renamed as Harijan, continues to inspire us in our resolve that no one is left behind, and in fact to help the farthest behind first. Gandhian philosophy is an inspiration for the individuals wanting to be agents of change, as they strive to make the world a better place. His teachings are universal in character, in both space and time, and will continue to offer solutions to address the contemporary challenges faced by humankind. Gandhiji propounded the idea of sustainable development. His views of self-sustenance operate as driving philosophy behind all global efforts of sustainable development. Gandhiji had said, "Earth has enough for human need, but not for human greed." In the words of Mary E. King, and I quote, Gandhiji was against racism, against colonialism, against the caste system, against economic exploitation, against the degradation of women, against religious and ethnic supremacy. And as long as there is strife, hostilities, ethnic cleansing, religious unrest, internal conflicts, and threats of military occupation, people will turn to Gandhi. His usefulness will not end unless conflict ceases, unquote. Gandhiji and Gandhianism are always more than what we all know. Gandhiji's contribution offered us independence, but his ideologies enlightened India as well as the world, even today after so many years. Perhaps this was known to Nobel Prize winner Rabindranath Tagore in those days, and he had rightly called Mahatma Gandhi as Gandhiji as the Mahatma. Every individual thus can benefit by following key Gandhian ideologies in their day-to-day life for a happy, prosperous, healthy, harmonious, and sustainable future. As we celebrate the strides that India has made in the last 75 years, I'm happy to note that Indians are striving to make India a country of Mahatma's dreams while adhering to his teachings and values. Let us reaffirm our resolve today to live by the values and ideals espoused by Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. I once again compliment Niranjan from Mahatma Gandhi Society for organizing this symposium today, and to each one of you who've gathered here for their participation. Thank you.
Thinking that his message is very much applicable today, and we should continue to listen to his messages and try to put them into practice. Thank you. Now I invite the eminent theologian, Professor Anthony Maher. He is the Executive Director of the Australian Centre for Christianity and Culture, based in the Parliamentary Triangle on the shores of Lake Burley-Griffin. He is a Fellow of the Higher Education Academies in the UK and Director of the Centre for Religion, Ethics and Society. That society works to bridge the divide between faith, theology, and post-secular life. This includes social, economic, and political ethics, together with ecumenism. Anthony is currently developing a significant ecumenism, indigenous and interfaith proposals to contribute to the social and spiritual well-being of Australia and other regions. He has written several books on faith, education, spirituality, and theology. So now we go back to our program, and I invite my favorite member of Parliament, and he doesn't know we worked so hard during his election time. So, which was a great pleasure, and we'll continue to work. Thank you very much, David Smith. Please come and share your views.
Thank you for your order. Maybe I should be brief, which should always be a blessing from a politician. But first of all, good evening, everyone. It's such an honour to be here and to be involved in organising this symposium. And look, I'd also like to acknowledge that the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, and extend my respects to the elders past and present. I'd further like to acknowledge any First Nations people that might be with us here today. This is a pretty special room, the main committee room. So it's there's often rooms in this parliament that you may be more aware of. The main chambers, possibly the Great Hall, but this is one of the key rooms in which there's that opportunity for the public and the parliament to come together for really important inquiries. So this is where often many of the significant hearings occur. During the last parliament though, and particularly because of COVID, this is actually where the Federal Labor Party caucus met. So to make sure that we had enough room so that we could be properly spaced between, and this is where we had, I guess, all those debates about ideas and proposals and thoughts about where we saw the direction of the country going. And often these debates don't make it out into the media, but it's often where individual members of caucus have to show the most courage. This is where members get the greatest opportunity to put their stamp on the direction, particularly of the Labor Party. So this is actually a very special room, not just in terms of its continuing purpose as the main committee room, but in terms of the broader role that it's played. And look, I'd like to recognise many of the guests here today too, and particularly acknowledge the extraordinary work that the High Commission does, supporting so many events every week. I would think, but there's so much extraordinary diversity in those events. I had the great fortune to be at a cultural event some weekend, the Colours of India event, which was an extraordinary blend of both modern and historical sort of dance, and I really appreciate that. But look, it's a particular honour to be here, obviously, today on this special occasion, an occasion that bears significance not only for India but for Australia and the numerous countries and peoples across the globe that have been inspired by the extraordinary work and philosophy of Gandhi. We're lucky to have an extraordinary Australian Indian community in the ACT that is so active in celebrating and engaging with the community for such occasions and engaging on so many different levels. Not only are these occasions an opportunity to bring the community together, but particularly an event such as this is a reminder of the shared values that we have of democracy, peace and common prosperity. The monument of Gandhi that the Australian Indian community provided in Glebe Park is for me a clear example of your ongoing generosity to our broader Canberra community and a proud reminder of those shared values, with those inspiring words inscribed for all Canberrans to ponder. No politics without principles, no commerce without morality, and no science without humanity. As I said before, this is a room where much of the policy consideration of this current government was hatched, and often these are the sorts of values that need to underpin those sorts of thoughts. Gandhi lived by this message and importantly left us with two particularly great legacies. The first, of course, is a free and prosperous nation, an India that stands as an example to all people, that democracy can flourish with great diversity. The second legacy is one that perhaps speaks to us with the greatest sense of urgency in these troubled times, and one that's pertinent today as we commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Bali bombings. That great and substantial political change can occur by non-violent means, and indeed that's the pathway to lasting great change. That the concerted resistance of the people can knock down any barriers that put before them. Gandhi's legacies continue to resonate with what India and Australia stand for and what we have in common. We are both underpinned by pluralistic democracies, a free press and an independent judicial system. However, as I said, we both find ourselves as two great democracies in uncertain and challenging times. Through our shared values, we must work together not only to increase the happiness, prosperity and security of our own nations, but people everywhere. And we have a shared interest and a shared ambition in a stable and prosperous region where sovereignty is respected. This is critical in shaping the peaceful Indo-Pacific region we want, where no countries or peoples are dominated by another. Diplomacy always triumphs power by force. As Gandhi would remind us, power based on love is 1,000 times more effective and permanent than the one derived from fear of punishment. I'm proud to see India and Australia's diplomatic ties deepen over recent years with common purpose. We are now comprehensive strategic partners, economic ties have been accelerated, and we are strengthening education links and enhancing our climate change and new clean energy engagement. Just days ago, and I think also today, India's External Affairs Minister has been in Australia meeting with Australian governments and ministers. We're recommitted to opening a Consulate General in Bengal, and my understanding is that India is planning an additional consulate in Australia. This is a testament to what can be achieved when we choose to navigate our way through such challenging times peacefully but together. We're demonstrating to the world the overwhelming advantages of peaceful engagement, development and common prosperity. Gandhi's life was his message, and it's important that we continue to do the same to convey the importance of the message in our region. Thank you to Krishan and to the whole committee of the Mahatma Gandhi Society for putting together this magnificent symposium tonight. I am slightly overawed with the standard of speakers that we have, with Professor Nandan and also the newly appointed Executive Director of the Centre for Culture and Christianity here in Barton. It's a privilege for me to be able to share your company and to play a part in hosting the event tonight. And of course, happy birthday to one of the giants of social and political history, Mahatma Gandhi.
Thank you very much for providing your great ideas on the legacies that Gandhiji has left for us. It's very interesting to note that those legacies that we need to follow. So I now invite Professor Anthony Maher to come and enlighten us on Gandhi's religions and the relevance of Gandhi in today's environment.
I don't know if I can live up to that bit about enlightening you. I'm the one who's actually receiving the learning. So thank you to our distinguished guests for teaching me more about Gandhi. So when I leave here, of course, I'll know far more than when I arrived. So I'm very grateful for that. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging our distinguished guests, and I should also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging of the traditional landowners, and I should also add that I pledge in all areas of my work and my life to advance to the best of my ability the causes of truth-telling and reconciliation in Australia and in particular in our nation's capital. So as we gather then to celebrate the 153rd birth anniversary, as a public theologian based down at the ACCC, which is an ecumenical and interfaith outreach, it is a great privilege to be invited here to speak to you in these hallowed grounds of Australian democracy. Although I have to come clean and acknowledge I am far from an expert on Gandhi, and there are many more people in this room and elsewhere who are far better qualified to speak on Gandhi than I am. So therefore, I will limit my reflections from a Christian perspective to what I'm calling three graces. The three graces of Gandhi for our time and for our lives here in Australia. Those three graces I think, and of course there are many more, but I'll just pick three from a Christian perspective. Those three graces I understand to be, he's a model of servant leadership. He highlighted the importance of Indigenous education and reconciliation almost before anybody else. And the Satyagrana, if I pronounce that right, the holding on to truth above all else, the philosophy of truth seeking. I'll say a brief word or two about those three graces, and then I'll try and say another word or two about how they apply to us and our lives here in Australia. So first of all, as a theologian, let me just say a word about grace. So grace, I believe, is a gift from God. Grace is revealed in the world and can be experienced by all people of God. Grace liberates us. It communicates the power of God that continually reveals new hope and future possibilities. From a Christian perspective, the above three graces from the life of Gandhi serve to bring about human freedom and flourishing on earth as it is in heaven. Gandhiji experienced and realized unity in diversity. His philosophy of life has four elements, namely truth, non-violence, fearlessness, and this pursuit of truth, Satyangrana. One of Gandhi's closest friends, I learnt, was Reverend Charles F. Andrews. Andrews was an Anglican priest and a Christian missionary, what we might call today a public theologian. Reverend Andrews was perhaps the only major figure to address Gandhi by his first name, Maher. Andrews was a social reformer, an educator, an activist for Indian liberation. In 1914, it was Andrews who travelled to South Africa, where Gandhi was involved in the Indian civil rights movement, and he persuaded the Mahatma to return to India to lead the campaign for India's independence. Andrews also supported movements to ban the untouchability of outcasts and was deeply impressed by Gandhi's knowledge of Christian values. C.F. Andrews was affectionately called by Gandhi Christ's faithful apostle, based on his initials, C.F.A. And so it is obvious to all students of Gandhi that there was a very close bond between this Hindu and this Christian, which Gandhi then carried out, and Andrews did. Andrews, as you know, went off to Fiji and did work there. That bond between the two people of different faiths was so strong and stands still as an example to all of us involved in interfaith dialogue. So I'll just say a word now about Gandhi and religions. I was told in the lift on the way up here that Gandhi believed in all religions. And so I just want to say a quick word about that. Christians in Kerala believe that St. Thomas, one of Christ's apostles, visited India in the 52nd century and established one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. That community now numbers 30 million people. There are more Christians in India than the population of Australia. There are more Christians in India than the whole of Europe practicing Christians, which is quite remarkable. So we don't think of India as a powerhouse of the Christian faith, but it is, in fact, and has been for 2,000 years. It seems to be the case that Gandhi was also an admirer of Jesus, but not of the British Empire, which attempted to use Christianity to justify its colonial rule. For over 150 years, Christianity in India was inextricably mixed up with British rule. Gandhi explained in one of his many unforgettable quotes, "I like your Christ," he said. "I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are unlike your Christ." Then he says, which is even more striking, if it wasn't for you Christians, I'd be a Christian. And when you think of what he experienced at the hands of Christians, we can begin to understand what he means. As a Christian, I can acknowledge Gandhi can be a teacher of me and my fellow Christians. He insists, for example, quote, live like Jesus did and the world will listen to you. Jesus is an ideal and wonderful. But then again he says, well, you Christians aren't like him. So it's a reminder to all Christians to live like Jesus and try and be the Christian that Jesus wanted us to be. True religion, Gandhi taught, is not narrow dogma. It is not external observance only. Gandhi described Jesus as the Prince of Peace. On reflection for today, one becomes cognizant of the Russian Christian leaders who currently seek to persuade the Russian people that Putin's war in Ukraine is a so-called holy war. The Christian leaders in Russia, some of them, are attempting to justify the war in Ukraine. Gandhi held the view that all religions were true and also that all had some error, and we certainly do have some error. Whilst I hold on my own, my Christian faith, I should also hold dear other people's faiths. And this was, as you know, a central teaching of Gandhiji. He said, we can pray that Hindus will not be Christian, but that they would be better Hindus. And so I pray that Christians will be better Christians. So something on the three graces for today. First, Gandhi as a model of servant leadership. There is much evidence to suggest that servant leadership was practiced in ancient India. Rabindranath Tagore, Nobel laureate for literature from India, said, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I woke and saw that life is service. I acted and behold, service is joy. That philosophy is an ancient philosophy of India to which Gandhi taught the rest of the world. Servant leadership characteristics include, for our time, practiced by Gandhi, the ability to listen, empathy, healing, awareness, persuasion, desire for others to succeed even before ourselves, servant leadership, capable of building communities. More theologically, servant leadership characterizes self-sacrifice, love, transcendent spirituality, ethical integrity, simplicity, emphasizing again the needs of others, especially those who were impoverished or somehow marginalized in our society. Drawing upon his love of the Bhagavad Gita and other sacred texts, Gandhi personified at various times in his life all of the above characteristics of servant leadership. He's acknowledged around the world, as we've heard, as one of the greatest leaders who practiced non-violence in his fearless pursuit of truth. For brevity, Gandhi's example of servant leadership in South Africa must suffice for me to illustrate very briefly this aspect of servant leadership. For example, Gandhi's service started in his days in South Africa, where he taught English to Indians without any remuneration to improve their living conditions among the racial tensions. At one point, when a leper came to see, knocked at his door, he gave him food, dressed his wounds, looked after him, and then sent him to the hospital. As he longed to be involved in humanitarian work, he helped as a nurse in a hospital and spent 2 hours daily serving the patients when he was in South Africa. When the Black Plague, which was more terrible and fatal than the bubonic plague, struck Indians in South Africa, Gandhi volunteered to be a nurse to care for the victims, disregarding infection and fully knowing the dangers that he was entering into to care for those people. He still did it. When Gandhi, pardon me, I've just lost my space. The second grace for our time, Gandhi's recognition of the importance of Indigenous education for reconciliation. While he was in London to attend the Second Roundtable Conference in 1931, Gandhi gave now a very famous speech at Chatham House on his vision for education for an independent India. He argued that literacy levels declined in India after the British introduced their system of education, referring to the indigenous education system of education as, quote, the beautiful tree. Gandhi said the British uprooted this system and left it to wither away over time. An independent India, he argued, would educate the people in their mother tongue and return to activity-centred education to make the children skilled and independent. He advocated for education that developed children's minds, body and soul in a heuristic way that could also meet the needs of the future. Gandhi's contribution to education is unique in the sense that he made the first attempt to develop an indigenous scheme of education in British India. With the advent of British colonial rule, an alien system of imperial education was imposed upon the people, which Gandhi argued was a contradiction to the age-old, unique and all-inclusive holistic education system that India had been practicing for millennia. Gandhi's characteristics of education include: education should be for all children. It should be free and compulsory. The language of teaching, as I said, should be in the mother tongue. Practical skills should be taught along with literacy. Education should be contextual to the community and the child. It should include values education that speaks to body, mind, heart and soul. Education should lead, as I've said, to practical work and economic independence and self-reliance. In sum, Gandhi insisted education for all children should be culturally contextual, resonate with spiritual realities. To that end, language is central, for we think in language, and without our language, we struggle not only to articulate our own identity, but to understand our existential and spiritual realities. Without language, we struggle to understand our very reason to exist. That resonates powerfully with me in Australia on the importance of creating space where our Indigenous brothers and sisters can relearn, recreate, produce dictionaries and teach their young children their own language. In that language they can then speak meaningfully about their spirituality, their land and their ancestors. That must be an imperative for all of us in Australia to work for. So the third grace, briefly, I wish to highlight from Gandhi for our time is Satyagraha, which I think, again, like the other two, is essential. Satyagraha is a Sanskrit word that comes from the root Satya, meaning truth, and Agya, meaning insistence. Sorry about my pronunciations. It can be loosely translated to mean insistence on truth or holding on to truth. The concept was developed and introduced by Mahatma Gandhi, and he used it in his independence movement in India and his earlier struggles for human rights, as determined by non-violence. Mahatma Gandhi found an ashram to teach his philosophy. Gandhi considered Satyagraha not only a tactic to be used in political struggle, but also a solution to interpersonal conflicts. He believed it should be taught to everyone. We too should teach it. A person who practices Satyagrana is Satyagrana. Today, as you know, our time is regularly characterized as post-truth. We live, it feels, in a post-truth culture. Our society at times seems focused on opinion more than facts. Our news is becoming limited. We are losing respect for empirical evidence, data, facts. More often we seem drawn to ideologically driven opinion over facts. Such opinion seeks to divide people, to divide communities, and ultimately to divide nations. In truth, we know many of our news outlets peddle fake news. An increasing number of autocratic countries around the world seek to shape truth in their own image, similar to particular religious leaders who shape God in their own image. Objective, public, philosophical notions of truth in our world are seriously in danger. From ideological and subjective notions of truth. Truth, ladies and gentlemen, is the guardian of knowledge. It is the guardian of science, philosophy, theology, law, yes, and in this very place, it is the guardian of democracy. Governments and multinationals can now shape truth in their own image and in their own narratives. In truth, in Ukraine, there is a war, and it's Putin's war. It's not a special military operation. In America, and potentially in Australia, democracy is in serious peril from an endless cycle of fake news and language of untruths in which we are all becoming very skilled masters of self-deception. We choose the news we want to read. As Jesus of Nazareth said, the truth will set you free. Truth, as Gandhi taught, is the way to human flourishing. It is the truth that has the potential to save us and our planet from climate change. Gandhi's philosophy of truth, insisting on the truth, is perhaps needed today more than ever before. Gandhi said, "I worship God as truth only. I have not found him yet, but I am seeking after him. I am prepared to sacrifice these things, dearest to me, in pursuit of this quest, even if the sacrifice demands my very life. I hope to be prepared to give it." That was the value upon which Gandhi placed truth. Another powerful message and grace for us today. A Catholic philosopher who spent his life in the pursuit of truth, George Tyrrell, candidly admitted as he was excommunicated, "I will follow truth to hell if necessary." John Henry Newman, forced to give a toast to Queen and Pope, paused for a moment and said to Queen and Pope, but first to conscience. Conscience being the arbiter of all truth. To our conscience we're all called to be true. So to conclude, Gandhi's notion of truth is a way of exemplifying the karma yoga path, which epitomizes selfless action to achieve spiritual liberation. This requires, as I've been arguing, servant leadership. As a man of faith, Gandhi also, in many respects, I understand to be a public theologian. He embodied his faith in public life, on the streets of India, if you will, seeking to shape public discourse, uphold the rights of citizens, and defend the principles of democracy and law. Gandhi reminds us today that no religion which is narrow and which cannot satisfy the tests of reason will survive the coming reconstruction of society, in which values have changed and character, not possession of wealth, title or birth, character will be the test of truth. In sum, today we need more prophets like Gandhi. engaged in public theological discourse, who can speak to concrete issues of our life, like democracy and the issues of society at large. The three graces I have shared with you in the life and thought of Gandhi can help each of us to respond with hope to the most pressing challenges of our time in new, embodied, creative and faithful ways. Thank you for the privilege of being here.
Thank you for pointing out the three graces of Gandhiji. Next visionary speaker is Emeritus Professor Satendra Nandan. He is an academic, author, politician, and a poet. He is well known as a Fijian, where he won the election on Fiji Labour Party ticket and became a cabinet minister. He later assisted in writing the Fijian current constitution, on which 2 elections have now been held. As an academic, he has worked in universities in Delhi, in Leeds, UK, Fijian University of South Pacific, Canberra's Australian National University, and finally, University of Canberra. He has written over 20 books and won a number of awards. He has devoted his life to Gandhi philosophy. As I mentioned earlier, he visited the South African railway station, which changed Gandhiji's life. And then Professor Nandan has also visited Birla House, where Gandhiji lived his last days. And then he has also offered prayers at Rajghat. And then he has visited a number of other Gandhi's ashrams. Therefore, he is an expert on Gandhi culture, and it gives me great pleasure to invite Professor Nandan to enlighten us on the relevance of Gandhiji today. Thank you.
Thank you, Niranjan, the President of the Gandhi Society. You have really left me speechless after so much that you researched on me. I'm very impressed that somebody knows me so well, and it's a very dangerous thing to know someone so well. But I'm very grateful for your generous introduction. President of the Gandhi Society, Mr. Niranjan Aggarwal, Your Excellency Suneet, Mehta, Honorable David Smith, and Professor Anthony Maher, from Executive Director of the Australian Centre for Christianity and Culture. Wonderful speakers. They've made us think on so many dimensions of Gandhi, because Mahatma Gandhi was a man of many dimensions. I know no human hand which has written more than Mahatma Gandhi. His works have now been published in 112 volumes. If anyone can tell me anyone else who has done that, I will be very grateful, and I will then get to know who is this person who has written more than Mahatma Gandhi. In the last couple of weeks, in fact, I've been giving a few not a few, but a couple of lectures, one at ANU on Gandhi's religion, searching for the great soul. I spoke for 1 hour there until I saw my university friend Rocco here, starting shaking his hand, whether his watch had stopped. So I stopped. I think I overshot him. Gandhi would have appreciated that. I hope that he did. Then at the Gandhi statue on October 2nd, where His Excellency the High Commissioner, who's not here unfortunately, he spoke, and I spoke and read a poem. In honor of those two things, I've already given this little book which I produced 2 years ago in honor of Mahatma Gandhi's 150th birth anniversary. I thought it should be remembered. And I have included in this poetry, prose, and a few articles of Mahatma Gandhi and what he has achieved, what he gave us in places like remote and obscure as Fiji. And I remember many years ago as a young student or young lecturer, we formed a small Gandhi society. And it was going to be part of the Gilmit Center, which was opened by Mrs. Indira Gandhi when she visited Fiji. Unfortunately, the center became a refugee shelter after 2 coups. Fiji in the last 30 years has had 4 coups, and we've survived. And I'm very pleased to say that not a single person of Indian origin was killed because of Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy, to which we were dedicated. It's wonderful to hear David, meeting him for the first time, thanks to Niranjan. And I discovered that he and my youngest daughter, who is a small writer in teaching in Sydney, were classmates, did honours together. I don't know how Kavita missed such a handsome young man, but we have many things in common. And I studied in A.D. Hall building, and my wife studied, and my youngest daughter also studied there. So I'm profoundly fond of ANU, and I would like to present this book to David. You don't have to leave me. And when I spoke on October 2nd at the Gandhi statue, in the shed of Mahatma Gandhi statue in Green Park, I read a poem on the Gilmit. Gilmit is the endangered system, we call it Gilmit. And I also gave a little talk. So I wrote a book called Gilmit Epic Lives in Small Lines, because I believe that Mahatma Gandhi was really created in South Africa. No Indian leader had ever been to that extent involved in South Africa. He spent 21 years there, and when he returned to India, he was 46 years old, but then fully developed public figure, from a shy, failed lawyer when he left India to go to South Africa. And by the time he returned, he had sharpened his weapon of Satendra and had shaken the British Empire. And of course, the people of India loved him. Millions and millions beyond India. But let us not forget that it was an Indian who assassinated him also. So that's the sadness, that's the other side of the coin that we can never forget. And I want to present this little book so that Suneet takes some interest in Fiji and the fate of the Gilmites there. Suneet? It was great to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned, I have in the last 2 weeks given two talks. One on Gandhi's religion, searching for the great soul. One on reading a poem from the book, and a little talk in shade of Mahatma Gandhi's statue, to which Mr. Aggarwal has given us a wonderful statue in Glebe Park, where I go there quite often and take my friends to see it. He's now preparing to give one to Fiji as well. And I thought, what will I speak on tonight in such a distinguished company? Professor Maher, great theologian and thinker, David, who's a very popular and great politician, and of course, from the Indian High Commission. So I chose a subject which I think might be of some interest to you. And therefore, let me begin. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this memorable occasion, on Mahatma Gandhi's 153rd birth anniversary, in this August Parliament House, in such a distinguished company like yourselves. Jyoti and I, my wife, are delighted to be with you all tonight, listening and thinking about Mahatma Gandhi. Often we love best what we have lost forever. But fortunately, the Mahatma lives in our Atma, in our soul, as our speakers have shown us. For me, the Parliament of a free country is a symbol of freedom, a modern temple of rights and responsibilities enshrined in the Constitution of this ingenious invention, created by men and women, not unlike us after centuries of sacrifices and struggles. At the center of it all is a moral presence, and things begin to fall when its inclusive morality in a people is superseded by brute materiality and mentality, something to which Professor Maher alluded to in his wonderful talk. Trust and truth are two wings, freedom and fearlessness. We experience them daily in the lives of our ordinary people, as we see every day on the screen, television screen, how people are struggling, the pain of Ukraine, and the people in the flood that we see in our neighborhood. In parliamentary democracy, vision deepens into the conscience of a nation by its acts and our respect for one another. Our compassion of the heart and charities of our imagination are multiplied to touch other lives, once seemingly different and distant. We begin to think together, as we are doing this evening, and live and learn to forgive also. Freedom grows with the progressive enlightenment and innovation of a people with a sense of self, rooted in equal citizenry, human dignity, and that shared, inseparable humanity that brings us here tonight. For Gandhiji, the political was personal. The means were as important as the ends. The tree was in the sea. So I'll be both personal and political. Forgive me for that. I have been an MP in one of the smallest parliaments floating on the largest ocean on earth. I have witnessed its desecration by 10 masked gunmen led by a third-ranking colonel of the Royal Fiji military forces. In fact, I have the dubious distinction of the last legitimate interjection recorded in Fiji, Hansard, on that fateful day, 14th May 1987, at 10:10 a.m. You have heard of people being assassinated in Parliament, but you would not have heard of a whole government being abducted and taken for a week, where my wife, children, and my friends didn't know where we were. Ladies and gentlemen, history hurts. When the colonel was given a few years later, after an untimely death of the elected, militarily deposed Labour Prime Minister, my friend Dr. Timothy Babandla, the colonel was given a 21-gun salute in this Parliament, one with faith in one of the world's finest institutions, certainly the most expensively constructed and opened during the bicentennial in 1988, was shaken but not shattered, because we had grown on the faith of Mahatma Gandhi. Democracy on the surface can be as soft as silk, but it also has the resilience of steel in its composition and conviction. And I complained to Mr. Paul Keating, who was the Prime Minister at that time, and he invited me to have a little chat. And its capacity to regenerate from within and keep us warm and dreaming in a homespun shore of many colours as Australia is becoming today. Resilience and faith come to the fore in any crisis, and democracy demands the best from us in the worst of times. We continually reimagine our nation and live in its narrations from the epics to our most mundane laws. We remake our destiny in the family of nations and become a link in the chain of our being and becoming. Every democracy, like life, is a work in progress. The people of Fiji showed both quiet courage and a steely resolve to solve their problems peacefully. Since then, Fiji has had 4 constitutions. I had a small hand in designing the last one, in 2013, on which 2 free elections have been held peacefully, and the 3rd one is due later this year. It was our Gandhian patience and persistence in the face of an unnecessary tragedy unknown in the islands, a belief that things can be changed peacefully, whatever the challenges, however dark the night. The restorative healing in life's broken links is a great gift of the great soul. Gandhiji was a man of an oceanic faith. He called it truth, ahimsa, love in action, of which you heard tonight from our 3 speakers. He saw his life's work wrecked by a communal partition. For him, it was not just the partition of a beloved land and its pulsating civilization, but the partition of a mighty heart of a very ancient land that had sheltered many people of every faith from every corner of the world. Gandhi suffered many defeats, but he believed in only one victor, God's truth and the goodness in the human heart. And Satendra became, truth with time became more than a principle. He practiced it daily. He revealed the splendor of that spirit that he called soul force and developed into Satyagraha. As long as you believe that, God will help. God will help and broken life can be mended. His faith never faltered, though he failed often to convince others of the one and only path to follow, no matter how dark the night. One step at a time, lead me kindly light, and often he walked alone. He saw that human beings were marginally more inclined to good than evil, and on that slight imbalance we may survive in a nuclear age. Even when I am speaking to you tonight, we are threatened by some madman. It is out of the brokenness of life that the Mahatma gave the world a unique and universal self-belief. Satyagraha, coupled with ahimsa, concept as old as hills and rivers, but often forgotten in our personal trials and tribulations of life. Only the brave can use them. 2 words more potent than 1 billion swords. Only the other day, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, implored us to see the dangerously fragile condition of our contemporary crisis-ridden world, wars, famine, climate catastrophes, COVID-19, nuclear threats, as if the Titanic were sinking and we were shuffling the deck chairs and cared only for the privileged cabins we occupied while the orchestra played on blissfully unaware of the sinking ship that the boat, unsinkable, had hit an iceberg. Antonio Guterres' cry was from the heart of a deeply divided, desperate United Nations. We must heed it, and we must raise that voice, repeat it 1 million times in this Parliament. Otherwise, what is freedom for? Tonight in this Parliament, I'm going to say a few words on the ideas of freedom and peace, and the invention of the idea of India as a modern, political, democratic nation that Gandhi attempted to create, and for which he died the most ineffable death imaginable. It is here that Gandhi is that India is the most exciting modern experiment in the making of a nation. Most nations were created out of religion, race, ethnicity, languages, geography, wars, conquest, and colonization. The invention of modern India was unique. Never before was an ancient civilization driven with such complex contradictions and redefined by multiple cultural strands of invasions and conquest, indigenous and migrants, castes and creeds, was created into a dynamic democracy of immense significance and increasing influence, political creativity at its best. To have won the freedom without killing a single soldier of an imperial, often brutal army remains the great miracle of history. Its vision is rooted in Mahatma Gandhi's ideas of freedom and Swaraj, self-independence, and is shaped and sharpened in an exilic condition on another continent in very dark times. As a South African leader said the other day, that you sent us a failed lawyer, and we sent you back a Mahatma. He gave us the gift of self-respect, personal and national. In respecting him, our own self-respect is enhanced. We are ennobled by his nobility of thought and inaction. How many leaders today you see on your television screen daily would you bow to or take off your hat and respect them? Very few. I have had the honor of speaking in the precincts of at least 4 parliaments, including the largest in New Delhi and the mother of parliaments in London. In this parliament, I've had the privilege of launching 2 books, one on Fiji's shattered coups and the other in the refugees. David, at that time you were not an honorable member, but I'm so happy you are here today. But tonight is special to celebrate the birth of the man who understood the true meaning of Swaraj, freedom, more deeply than anyone else I have read about. And to have brought him into this parliament is, I think, of historic significance, and my friend Krishan Aggarwal deserves all the thanks that one can give. It is, I believe, his ideas of freedom, from fear set free, and basic human decency that still sustain the great experiments of pluralist democracy in human history. It is a gift of the kind of India that the Mahatma and his remarkable colleagues, fighters for freedom, conceived during those struggling years ago, those struggles many, many years ago. The idea still breathes despite hiccups in the present conditions in India, in the tumultuous, multitudinous democracy that I feel is the hope of humanity in many parts of our global family. India has been an inspiration to many nations and peoples. It must continue to be so. I remember I got a little scholarship thanks to Pandit Nehru and Abdul Kalam Azad, the education minister. And when I tell my children that my scholarship monthly stipend was worth less than a cup of coffee today, cappuccino, but without it, thousands of young people would not have studied from third world countries who studied in India and went on to serve their countries from Trinidad to Mauritius to Africa and many other places, and Fiji, of course. That idea, Gandhi is the true light on the hill. If not a light, David, at least the lighthouse, very wide seas. In Australia, one man understood him more than others. Patrick White, our only literary Nobel laureate, knew Gandhi deeply. In his first book published in 1939, he had an epigraph from Gandhi's essay on suffering. And I quote, "It is impossible to do away with the law of suffering, which is the one indispensable condition of our being. Progress is to be measured by the amount of suffering undergone. The purer the suffering, the greater is the progress." And my friend Krishan tells me that you write too much about suffering. My new book that's coming out next month is called Grief, A Love in Grief. He said I should write a more optimistic thing, but I think there's something, when you think of Christ or the Buddha or Gandhi, Gandhi is often put in, Patrick White and others put him in the company of the Buddha and Christ. You'll find that suffering is a very creative thing. The power of suffering is much greater than the power of joy, because out of that joy, it's like a mother giving birth to a child. There's pain, but out of that great joy comes out when you see the first smile of a little baby. So I'm not that distressed by suffering. We've all gone through it in our personal lives, in our political lives, in our country, from where our communities we come from. But something keeps us going, the sunshine, the daffodils bloom every day. I bring the great writer and the great soul together tonight to make us think together. If one reads Patrick White's essays and speeches of the 1980s, one cannot but be moved by his plea for peace and the impending destruction threatened by nuclear weapons. I wish people would read his wonderful book called Patrick White's Speeches, and there he mentions Gandhi several times. I think time has come to revise those, to revive those calls in Parliament. Why are people not speaking about peace in this Parliament? Solomon Island does a little thing, the first thing we go for is gun, another submarine against the Chinese. Why are people not saying that we must invest not in submarines so much, but in peaceful, creativity within these islands. Every time there is someone fired a shot, we go for our own slings and arrows or gunshots. I think if we spend half the money we spent on army, on peaceful activities, we would have achieved so much more, especially in our region. I think the time has come to revive those calls in this parliament. And I'm very surprised and shocked that hardly anyone speaks here in this parliament of peace in our time, in our region, of these little islands that depend on us. It is time, as Mr. Gough, my favourite Prime Minister of Australia, would say, to seek a newer world with fearlessness of the Mahatma. It won't be easy, but I believe our Prime Minister, Mr. Anthony Albanese, can think differently from many. He has this opportunity today. It will be a long journey, but they might not. Gandhi's journeys were very, very long indeed. Gandhi himself was never even a member of Parliament. However, he gave birth to an idea of a free society, of free men and women who had faith, who also had faith in the idea of truth greater than themselves or their own narrow national identities. Every time you hear a politician talking of national interest, I cringe. National interest is connected to a regional interest, to world interest. We have given so much that other people dominate so much of our life through their materialistic inventions. We have even given our whole port to a country with which we are at the moment not on very happy terms. From farms to ashrams, from peasant to village to parliament, he had only one method, which is Mahatma, to live in peace and let people live. As a lawyer, he understood the rule of law for justice and human dignity, and also to oppose unjust laws. And he was shaped in exile so that he could see the flaws nearer home, in his backyard. How much of our modern world is shaped by exiles, emigres, expatriates, migrants, like so many of us here tonight. We are all travelers in the same ships, in the same seas. Our horizons may change, but the sea is the sea. No other Indian leader has had such an intimate experience of three continents. In fact, I can't think of any world leader who had Gandhi's experience so intimately connected with people in England, in South Africa, and of course India. When we think of the idea of India beyond its national borders, we think of this saintly soul more than any other. Perhaps today, in our diasporic condition, we should be thinking, what is unique that India can contribute to our world to prevent it from going mad in pursuit of power without glory? The holy and heroic life of Mahatma Gandhi is, I think, the most significant and enduring message to a stricken and threatened universe, from climate change to the mischief of autocratic regimes, big and small, near and far. It is worth remembering that this ancient land with the oldest continuous culture on the planet began its modern garb as a penal colony. Today, Australia is the envy of the world, a veritable Noah's Ark for persecuted peoples from many parts of our world, including Fiji. They have come to this land to heal themselves and help others, and help heal others. It is our common home with a full granary, feeding millions outside its borders with a generosity that is worth emulating. Maybe we should look at the world from down under these days. What kind of freedom was Gandhi seeking? Although the idea of India was political in its conception, the Mahatma gave it a profoundly spiritual dimension rooted in its multiple but composite spirit of the land. He cared for the lost and the loneliest, as we ought to look for the homeless, the burnt ones, the asylum seekers, the vulnerable, and the dispossessed. For he knew that we all may not be created equal, but we are all cremated equal. As Albert Einstein remarked, and has been quoted before, Gandhi alone brought into politics a human conduct of the highest level. The ethical conduct in life was his hallmark. We are thinking of a national I take in Australia today. How have we been? In Fiji, we started it a few years ago. Why have people lost so much faith in our political leaders? It is something for us to think about. Has the nature of our society changed so dramatically and drastically that in the parliament in which we should be, a parliament of which we should be profoundly proud, and yet the constant thing about trusting this one, that one, treatment of women, corruption, hog-barreling. It's a very hating thing for our children. What example will they grow to become political leaders of the future? Out of the millennial depth of Indian civilization, the idea of democracy gave the Indian citizens the freedom to be human. It is the great gift of Mahatma Gandhi. He made the idea into a living reality. He set standards by which men and women live and love and continue the human adventure in the messy business of being human. And this is continuing even today as I'm speaking in a place like India, because everything is not hunky-dory there either. You see that daily on the vast, various, volatile continent and its many visionary citizens beyond its shores and within its borders. It took almost a century, from 1857 to 1947, when India gained a partition independence. This tryst with destiny was not wholly achieved, but it was substantial enough at a time when the world was being divided. India became a republic in 1950. Its generosity became legendary to many so-called third world countries. Today, Australia and India, as has been mentioned, are opening up to each other in most meaningful ways. It is this that is developing now in a creative dialogue and development down under for the benefit of the Indo-Pacific region in particular. It must be pursued with Gandhian passion and commitment. Who would have thought that tonight we would be remembering Mahatma Gandhi in the parliamentary precincts of an ancient island continent? Here our people have lived and loved and survived for at least 60 millennia, 65,000 years. The oldest and the most generous culture, without hierarchical castles, caste or class, archaic creeds, or the sounds of the drums beating in a war-weary world. We should not be too impressed by military might and economic liberty. Gandhi was able to shape the greatest empire the world has ever known. Look at yesterday's empires, which today are mud pools and rubbles of ruins we see on our television screens daily. There is something more permanent and powerful to which the great Mahatma drew our attention. That freedom, Purna Swaraj, individual Swaraj, freedom, he wrote about is not impossible to achieve, but we must try, both in our personal relationships and national friendship. Peace always deserves a chance. Imagine how much we spend on military machines. Soon the peaceful Pacific will have nuclear submarines scuttling the sands of our ocean and circling our island like sharks. And I am convinced that the coup in Fiji in 1987 was designed to remove a government, Labour government, that had declared its policy that there will be nuclear-free Pacific, as New Zealand had done. Although nobody had written about it. And I was the spokesman on nuclear-free Pacific, so I know that this was the reason for the real coup in Fiji that destroyed a beautiful little dynamic democracy. So for someone from Fiji with Indian Pacific origin, the creative development of the imagined relationship of these two multicultural democracies, Australia and India, one ancient, the other most modern, is most promising and augurs well for the future of our children and grandchildren in the region and those unborn generations. But we have to work incessantly towards strengthening it by words and deeds and new ideas. That is where the Rule statement from the heart plays an enlarging role. Mahatma Gandhi would have hailed that voice as part of this hallowed institution. More than Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream, it is really Aboriginal dreaming that may show us a new way to save more than ourselves, indeed our one and only planet, the speck of dust that gives us life and beauty all around us every morning. More things are possible, ladies and gentlemen, than this world dreams of, if you believe in Gandhi, in God, and basic human decency within you, and not be afraid of tyrants and racist bullies, migrants or indigenous. Let us not assume that all this colonial thing you talk about is only, look at what indigenous people are doing. I have been through it in Fiji. What's happening in Africa and many parts of our world, where the indigenous who are in power now, what they're doing to their own people. So it is not confined to one single race or community or religion. Both lead to freedom. It is a long road, but the journey is always worth continuing. The future is longer than the past, and therein lies our hope. It is no coincidence that our city's imaginative architect is buried in Lucknow, Arthur Burley Griffin. Burley Griffin is buried in Lucknow, from where my indentured ancestors migrated, rather were transported to the Fiji Islands. It is the only colony in the world I know where migrant people were uprooted from their ancient villages to save the indigenous way of life from being decimated. And look what an indigenous general did to these defenseless people, the descendants of the Gandhian people. Gandhi, the prolific journalist, tried to give this message of non-violence and peace 113 years ago in his remarkably prescient book, Hind Swaraj, written in 10 days on a ship. How prophetic he was can be seen that within 5 years, the book was published in 1910, and within 5 years, Europe was engulfed in a self-destructive Great War, which led to a more disastrous one 20 years later, the Second World War. And 7 decades later, we are on the eve of Armageddon, as President Biden has said. Really? Is there no other alternative? Is there no other way of thinking and solving this problem? You know, we are sending weapons here, there, everywhere. What if the United Nations were used more effectively with leaders who are still neutral, morally and otherwise, militarily? Can that initiative not be taken to prevent the unnecessary death in Ukraine? Of course, not all these ideas are workable. India today, in Gandhi's time, we had about 350 million people, 300 million. Today it's quadrupled. You know, so obviously his idea of celibacy doesn't work very effectively. Of course, not all his ideas, but he insisted on courageous resistance with non-violence, never with violence. On this, there was no room for compromise. In our rapidly changing contemporary world, the challenges are many and varied. How we cope with the ideas of peace, non-violence, and love may determine more than our future. It is about humankind's fate, coexistence, or no existence at all. The climate around us is ever changing. It's our responsibility, ladies and gentlemen, that it changes for the better. This Parliament is as precious as any. It can be a great lighthouse for smaller nations or region and a beacon of friendship among the bigger ones. India has many epic stories to tell, but for me, the greatest story of India is the story of Mahatma Gandhi's life, his message, his action, striding 3 continents and touching the 4 corners of our heart and soul. One hopes that our Parliament will be the voice of peace and hear the voices of peace, especially from the Pacific. As the anonymous Greek poet wrote many centuries ago, with Socratic wisdom, and where we are told ideas of modern democracy began in Greece. And he said, what else is wisdom? What of man's endeavor, or God's high grace, so lovely and so great, to stand from fear set free, to breathe and wait, to hold a hand uplifted over hate, and shall not loveliness be loved forever? I hope we have this evening planted in your hearts, in your spirits, a tiny flower of the loveliness seed in the floor yard next door of our most livable and lovable city, Canberra, and in the memory of a very ordinary but very extraordinary human being. Born in an obscure seaside port, not unlike the child born in manger, Gandhiji believed in grace and gratitude. I conclude my talk with those 2 words. Thank you.
That's why he's a professor. He's so illuminating and gets us back to think what we should be doing, and having decided what we should do and how we are going to do it. In that short time, he even told us what is a modern democracy should be, how we should be operating in this modern democracy, and in which the freedom of speech is most important. So, having heard all that, now I have to go back and rethink that what we are going to do in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's your time to say and speak. Now is the question time. You are welcome to make any comments or ask any questions. I'll invite all the 4 speakers to come and sit in the front. You want to keep sitting there? Okay. You see, he determines what we have to do. So, any questions? We have got a Symposium has got a traveling microphone on that one. You guys, he correct? So, any question, any comments? Anybody who wants to raise, he is more than welcome. Liberal Party future MLA, Mr. Shri.
Thank you, Krishan. Aggarwalji. And actually, I had no, I don't have any question. I just a comment. I think Subhash Chandra Bose once said that a man may die for an idea, but after his death, the idea reincarnates into 1,000 lives. This is how the dreams of one nation is bequeathed to the next. So Gandhi is a perfect example of that. And I think if this whole event will be incomplete if on behalf of everyone, I don't thank you for putting this together. So I mean, you are a testament that that idea is traveling, and your selfless service to the society, to the community, I think deserves not only acknowledgement but appreciation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your compliments. Any other questions? I know it's a very difficult one.
All the speakers have actually stressed that the time now is the time for the Gandhi principles to be looked at and the world should study. But the problem is that we have people born like Hitler in this world who wage wars and we can't do anything. We are not in a position like we understand the principle, but how do we change that? What is the Mahatma Gandhi Society, or how are we able to do that? Change those people who are in position of power, because as long as such people are born in the world, there will be wars.
I think we should, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we should respond to that very valid and good question, because power is, as Gandhiji said, somebody before him said, that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. In democracies, at least it is possible to put power under a microscope and to have a free media. Parliament is there. The danger is that the battle at the moment really is between 2 or 3 autocratic regimes, and they're increasing in number. What Mr. Trump did in America has damaged the movement of democracy for at least a generation, I think. America was the great citadel of freedom with all its problems. It is still the greatest democracy in the world, and India was the largest democracy in the world. Both these countries have to think together. You have challenges coming. Gandhi Mahatma was a very obscure, failed lawyer. He fought the greatest empire the world had ever known, without firing a shot, without raising his voice, without even raising a finger against anybody. That is the strength we have, that is the example we have, and it happened in our lifetime. So I don't think we should be discouraged. I think we need a group of people like this, and here I must compliment Niranjan for creating this Gandhi society. It will affect, just as my life was affected by a little book I read, little talk I listened to in the High Commission on Gandhi, and I wanted to go to no other country except India, because that life had touched my life. I was 16 years old then. Gandhi left India at the age of 19, and I left at the age of 18 for India. So I think we should not despair. There's enough goodness in the world. The sun still rises. And I'm quite amazed that someone like Mr. Biden felt that we are on the brink of Armageddon. Really? Do you believe that? With so much power and strength and ability to use the United Nations. But what Gandhi's thing was, people usually say, what would have Gandhi done in front of Hitler? That's a very valid question. Gandhi said, no, you fight peacefully. You can kill 100,000, 1 million. But you require courage of the self-sacrifice. Hitler went on to kill 6 million Jews. So my answer to that question is that you are in your heart yourself. You cannot be fighting for oil in the Middle East so that prices here are 10 cents less. You will have to pay that price if you want freedom for other people. And Mahatma Gandhi showed that when Gandhiji died, his total income, value of his property was less than £5, less than the scarf I'm wearing today. And yet, he could shake the richest empire of the time. And even to this day, whether it's India or Fiji or Australia, I know he gives tremendous strength to people who see darkness everywhere. This little light, like a Diwali here, keeps burning brightly. And that to me is the great thing. And the Gandhi Society, we've just begun, thanks to Bhaiji. And it will spread its light slowly. That's why I said it's the littlest light on the hill. But this is a beautiful city to begin Mahatma Gandhi Society. And at the appropriate moment, when we launch it properly, I will pay my tribute to one single man. I have not met such a man either in India or Fiji, Australia or England. And there is my very dear friend, Mr. Gandhianjali, Krishan.
Yes, is that we learn from their teachings, but we don't set them in concrete. If we set them in concrete, then they're dead. But if they're alive and they live, then they evolve. And they change and they adapt and they develop and they grow and they strengthen. And Gandhi's teaching in all of those respects, I think, are alive and they evolve, and we have to adapt with them for our time. So that's the first point. The second, one can hold the principle of non-violence as what I would describe as a pragmatic pacifist. So if you like, there are two kinds of pacifists. It's a bit of a generalization, but say there are two kinds of pacifists. There is a dogmatic pacifist who would refuse any sort of defense whatsoever. And then there's a pragmatic pacifist who wouldn't go and wage war, wouldn't invade another country,
But if the time came where we had to make a stand for the defence of the weak, the poor, the minority, for those who are invaded, then as a person who believes in pragmatic pacifism, that sometimes in life it is right to go and make a stand. Not because we're aggressive, but because we're defensive, and we're defending things that we think, as Mahatma Gandhi did, that we think we would give our lives for. And so when I look to India today, I see it as a country who can evolve Gandhi's teaching in a way that, yes, it can be a pragmatic pacifist, but it also has to be realistic, and it knows that, again, from a theological Christian perspective, I can say evil exists, just as good exists. And at times it is right to stand up to that evil, particularly defend those who need defending. Thank you.
Mr. Puri, thank you very much for raising a very interesting subject. Power is always the central point, but I think that's where Mahatma Gandhi has the basic teachings for us. As I said, he was sitting, when he was thrown out of the train, he was sitting cold winter night for 6 hours. Ordinary person would have said, well, that's the word, why bother, and I'll give up. But Gandhiji has taught us, as I said earlier, don't take a no for an answer. Think and find another way and achieve what you want to achieve. Gandhiji said, you be the change you wish to see. So, therefore, power is something that we create. It's up to us what power we want to have and how we create. But certainly, sometimes it's not easy, but it's persistence and courage. With those two ideas, you can achieve whatever you wish to achieve. Thank you. Dr. Singh.
No, it's all right. You have already spoken.
You got a mic?
I didn't want to ask more because there is already a lot of conversation. But I thought now, because you have given me an opportunity, thank you very much for hosting this such a wonderful session on Mahatma Gandhi. I think Gandhiji had two clear messages for us. And eye for eye cannot be an answer. And second is, no matter how violent the world goes, the answer is non-violence. Harshpuriji asked the question about the war-mongering attitude of a lot of politicians in today, and what else can we expect when world's greatest democracy, United States of America, Parliament gets invaded by hooligans. So that's the reality of the world, and then discussing and talking about non-violence here and not doing anything else from that. I think the greatest step forward could be that United Nations has already declared 2nd October as World Non-Violence Day, but there isn't any systematic effort coming from United Nations about setting up parameters, setting up examples for non-violence. And that needs to be done, I guess. I don't know if the speakers would like to comment on that. Thank you.
I think what you have said is exactly what we need today. Today, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of Bali bombing. That's not something that we need to celebrate. we need to celebrate Gandhi's birthday so that we can learn something from there and design the future. What's the point in celebrating Bali bombing? Was that an achievement? It was destruction. And that's where we needed the non-violence. So I agree with you. The question that you have raised is very interesting and relevant. So we have another 2 minutes.
I've got a short response to what you say, what you asked the question. And also like add to what to Professor said. I was an academic, so I couldn't help. My response to Ashpa's question is, when Gandhi was leading his non-violence movement, at the same time, the world had a leader that people like you and me put into the position of authority. Hitler. Perhaps they were the same age, I'm not sure how old Hitler was. As he was traveling his non-violence movement in Africa and came back to India, Hitler was rising to the bar. After the war, after the Second World War, we had our independence day from Britain. But who put Hitler there? He didn't go by himself. It's people who put him there. It's up to the people to make change. The people's power that make a big difference. Thank you.
But you also have to understand how these tyrants are created. If after the First World War, when Europe was so concerned about its imperial influence in Africa, India, Asia, everywhere in the world, and when Germany lost that, we have to go into history of the First World War and the Treaty of Versailles and see how humiliated the people of Germany were made. And Hitler took advantage of that. When that happens, and it's happening in certain parts of our own subcontinent, where you humiliate people. Gandhi never believed in humiliation. I was reading something about him. We said, a lady said that you went into his presence, you talked for 2 hours with him, and you came away feeling that your self-respect has been increased, not lessened, in the presence of most people. You know, prime ministers, ministers. People don't speak up. In Gandhi's case, he said that, no, speak your mind, listen to me, but don't follow me. Take it to your conscience. So I think in that sense you are right, that people put people there, but we also have to have pure motive in dealing with the people. How do we treat people who lose? How do we treat, for example, the great challenge for our region today is China, no question about that. India, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Korea, all these are getting together, including America. The Pacific, where nuclear-free Pacific is what we became members of parliament because of that. I was the first Labour member of parliament because of that philosophy. We wanted nuclear-free Pacific. Today, no voice is raised. We talk of Solomon Islands having a special relationship with China, just some stadium or something. And yet, how many times we have neglected the South, because with these 20 island countries. My own people went there, not to serve Fiji, they served CSR Company of Australia, if you know the endangered history. But when the coup happened, Australia did not offer the people of Fiji, the defenseless children of indentured laborers, and Bhavendra was an indigenous prime minister, not an Indian origin prime minister. Nothing was given. Even people like us, thank God to my university, after months of uncertainty, no job, I was the only man who lost 2 jobs in 2 days. I resigned from my university and the coup happened the next day. So I lost 2 jobs on this student. The point I'm making is that what is our obligation? No, people in Australia don't think that their country is rich today, have been shaped somewhat by outside forces. Indian soldiers were fighting to defend Australia long before Australian soldiers went to Gallipoli. because they were part of the British Empire. All the guns that killed people in Jallianwala Bagh were fired by Indians. So they were complicit in that as well. So we have to know that history. And we have to see that how much of our life and history of a nation, its people, is shaped by outside forces. And when Fiji is in difficulty or Papua New Guinea, I think there should be a voice in Australia which says, no, they are our people. They were part of us. And today when they're in difficulty, don't leave them in the lurch like they're drowning, not waving. So we are all waving toward Australia. It's a wonderful country to be in. It is 1.5 to 2 times size of India with the population of New Delhi, greater. And you cannot live and occupy this vast continent without paying a price, without recognizing that other people also need to make this their home if they want, because you have connections with them, umbilical connections, deeper connections that you can imagine. And I'm sure as Australia, with its general, I've known great generosity here, and I see it every day. And that gives me hope that this country, with the right kind of politics and politicians and leaders, will open its doors to asylum seekers, keeping people for 10 years in Nauru. Have you ever been to Nauru? I have. It's a desert island. Keeping them in Papua New Guinea's island. What basis are you doing that? And voices, no, if you get 20 people from Syria, those little children, 26 of them, your security is threatened. What kind of people are you? The children coming here will threaten your security. Surely we should have a little more self-confidence, a little more generosity, a little more open-heartedness. That our own people came here as dregs of society, penal colony, and look what they have created. And today, how much migrants have contributed to this world. Thank you.
Now is the time for vote of thanks. I'm sorry we have run out of time. And I request Mrs. Ruchika Jain to give us the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Sorry Suneet ji, we would love to hear more from you maybe next time. Thank you everyone here. Thank you Mahatma Gandhi Society for organizing this. Thank you Honorable MP David Smith for giving us the venue and for organizing it with us with such enthusiasm and for having spoken your frame of mind, interrelating the Gandhian philosophy with politics. And thank you, Professor Maher. You have given us a completely different perspective of looking at the Gandhian philosophy from a Christian perspective. This was completely new to us. It was really enlightening to hear you. Thank you, Professor Satendra and Nandan, for sharing us with you your views of your various perspectives that you personally hold of how the polity of the world should evolve. Thank you all the audience for patiently listening to us, for participating in the questions and the deliberations. Thank you, Suneet, for speaking and for sharing your views with us today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Finally, I thank you very much for coming. And now is the time for refreshments. And you can go outside and we have got refreshments and soft drinks. And thanks to the Indian High Commission, we got beautiful pictures of the life of Gandhiji, and starting from his young age right till the last day. So you can enjoy those pictures, and in the meantime, we'll also keep showing the pictures of Gandhiji. Thank you very much for coming.
चश्मा लेके आ गया अपना गांधी मिला ही नहीं।
सुरेंद्र जी ने बहुत बढ़िया काम किया है।
हाँ जी नमस्कार नमस्कार आइए दिस इज वेरी
नमस्ते आंटी। नमस्ते आंटी।
Thanks to Bharat International, thanks to Niranjan Aggarwal.
एक ले लिया जाए। हाँ जी बिल्कुल
Very nice.
वो हो गया।
Thank you सुरेंद्र भाई, बहुत बढ़िया काम कर रहे हैं।